This video is brought to you by Ground News. India has launched missile strikes against targets in Pakistan and Pakistani-controlled Kashmir, a move that Pakistan has described as an act of war. Meanwhile, Pakistan claims to have shot down Indian fighter jets in retaliation and has fired shells across the de facto border in the disputed Kashmir region. This latest fighting in the long-running conflict between the two nuclear-armed neighbours comes amid soaring tensions in the aftermath of a deadly terror attack in Indian-administered Kashmir that India blames Pakistan for backing. So in this video, we're going to explain these latest dramatic developments and look at the risk that the fresh clashes could escalate into a wider conflict. Do you have questions about TLDR's bias? Watch us respond to your criticisms in our dedicated criticism response video. It's linked in the description. We'll get on to India's airstrikes and Pakistan's response shortly, but first we're going to explain the background to the recent escalation in tensions. Last month, on the 22nd of April, at least 26 people, mostly Hindu Indian tourists, were killed in a terror attack near Pahalgam, a popular travel destination in Indian-administered Kashmir. The attack rocked India, not just because of the high death toll, but also because it targeted civilian tourists rather than security forces. In fact, the region's chief minister said the attack was, quote, much larger than anything we've seen directed at civilians in recent years, and the Indian government vowed a loud and clear response to those behind the attack. Now, exactly who was behind the attack remains unclear. Initially, a relatively little-known Kashmiri separatist group called the Resistance Front, or TRF, apparently claimed responsibility online. India considers TRF to be an offshoot of, or front for, the Pakistan-based militant group Lashkar-e-Taiba, which seeks to bring Indian-administered Kashmir under Pakistani control and was responsible for the 2008 Mumbai attacks that killed 175 people. However, according to more recent news reports, TRF has since retracted its claim of responsibility, apparently saying its earlier statement was the result of a cyber intrusion of some kind. Regardless, India has firmly pointed the finger of blame for the attack at Pakistan, accusing the Pakistani government of supporting cross-border terrorism, a charge that Pakistan flatly denies. As such, India announced a slew of measures against Pakistan, including downgrading diplomatic ties, cancelling visas, shutting the main border crossing, expelling diplomats, and perhaps most notably, suspending the 1960 Indus Waters Treaty, a long-standing agreement that regulates the sharing of water from the Indus River and its tributaries, which is crucial for things like agricultural irrigation and hydropower in Pakistan. In retaliation, Pakistan announced its own diplomatic and economic measures. But the big question was whether or not India would launch military action against Pakistan. And this week, that question was answered. Early in the morning of Wednesday the 7th of May, over the course of about 25 minutes, India carried out Operation Sindoor, striking targets in Pakistani-controlled Kashmir and Pakistan's Punjab province. The Indian military said it had struck 9 locations, which it described as sites of terrorist infrastructure associated with the Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba militant groups, adding that no Pakistani military, civilian or economic facilities were targeted. The Indian government called the strikes preemptive and precautionary, saying that Pakistan had failed to take action against terrorist infrastructure on its territory. Pakistan, however, says that these were not terrorist sites, and that civilians and mosques were hit across 6 locations targeted by India. According to Pakistani authorities, at least 26 civilians were killed by the strikes, and 46 injured. One strike, for example, hit Subhan Mosque in the Pakistani city of Bahawalpur. The Associated Press writes that the mosque is near a seminary that was once the central office of the Jaish-e-Mohammed group, which Pakistani officials say have not had an operational presence at the site since the group was outlawed in 2002. Jaish-e-Mohammed said on Wednesday that 10 family members of its leader had been killed in the strike. Pakistan calls the strike unprovoked, and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said Pakistan has every right to give robust response to this act of war imposed by India, and a strong response is indeed being given. According to Indian authorities, at least 10 civilians have been killed and 48 injured by Pakistani shelling across the line of control, which is the de facto border between Pakistani-administered and Indian-administered Kashmir. By Wednesday morning, Pakistan had also claimed to have shot down 5 Indian fighter jets, including several French-made Rafale, the pride of the Indian Air Force. Now, this claim is unverified, and the Indian government has not commented on it. However, according to Reuters, local government sources in Indian-administered Kashmir said 3 fighter jets had crashed in the territory, and footage of crash sites and debris from unidentified aircraft have been going round online. So, what might happen next? We're going to look at 2 contrasting potential outcomes. The first is that violence is limited and things don't escalate. The second, however, would see an escalation in a broader military conflict. Let's look at the first potential outcome. In this non-escalatory scenario, Pakistan would likely respond with its own retaliatory targeted strikes, and diplomacy would ultimately win out as both sides end up satisfied that they've defended their honour sufficiently and recognise that a wider conflict is not in their interest. In fact, this is sort of what happened with the last major clash between India and Pakistan back in 2019. A Pakistan-based militant group carried out an attack in Indian-administered Kashmir. India blamed Pakistan and launched a retaliatory airstrike on what it said was a terrorist training camp in Pakistan. Pakistan then struck India and shot down an Indian fighter jet during a dogfight, capturing the pilot before releasing him a few days later. The temperature cooled and things were largely settled a month after the initial attack. So, analysts note that the tit-for-tat actions and entrenched narratives are not an unfamiliar pattern. And some have suggested that talks over the Indus Waters Treaty, which India has previously unsuccessfully called for a renegotiation of, could provide an off-ramp for the current clashes. However, we shouldn't discount the risk of an escalation, and it's possible that the anger in each country towards the other is greater this time round. For example, it's worth remembering that the terror attack that fueled today's tensions targeted Indian civilians rather than security personnel. Additionally, despite India saying its military action was focused, measured and non-escalatory, the scale of its airstrikes on Wednesday was far greater than what we saw in 2019. So analysts note that the Pakistani military may be inclined to carry out a sizable response. Plus, the reported death toll from Wednesday's strikes and shelling by both countries is already higher than in 2019. Any military escalation, even a non-nuclear one, would have significant consequences, with the people of Kashmir bearing the brunt of it, but with reverberations that would be felt across the neighbourhood and wider world. Ultimately, we'll have to wait and see, and needless to say, de-escalation is the outcome that basically the whole world wants. It is, after all, in nobody's interest for a full-on conflict to erupt between 2 neighbouring nuclear powers, and as such, China, Russia, the US, UN, European countries and others have urged restraint and called for a peaceful resolution. This is a complex and nuanced story though, and as such there's plenty more to read about this online, with 700 sources reporting on it. The issue is, how can you be sure that what you're reading isn't hugely biased? Well, that's a problem we face when making these videos too, and luckily that's where this week's sponsor Ground News comes in. For this story in particular, they've identified that there were at least 107 left-leaning and 104 right-leaning sources reporting on it. In fact, in addition to this, they've also shown the main differences in headlines among left-leaning and right-leaning outlets, with left-leaning outlets tending to highlight casualty numbers and right-leaning ones emphasising India's justification and stated targeting of terrorist infrastructure. We're able to do that because of our sponsor Ground News, whose incredible website and app lets you discover the news and pulls back the curtain on media bias. That's because every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organisations. But one of the best parts of the app is their blind spot feed. It presents you with stories and articles that haven't been reported on by one side of the aisle or the other, helping you better break out of your media bubble and discover what those on the other side of the political spectrum are really saying. This is all in addition to the biased distribution we mentioned earlier, and together these fantastic features help you to figure out exactly who's behind the stories you're reading and what agenda they may have. Ground News is such a useful tool for our current media landscape, and I think an app like this will only become more essential as the media landscape continues to evolve. If you're interested in everything that Ground News has to offer, you can get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code. This offer is only available here, so make sure you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.